against other aggressive decks, and it's almost as if Impact brought a lineup that was the anti-aggro in a way.
Yeah.
I would say that the Rogue deck, the Odd Rogue, is very beneficial against decks like Zulok, and the Token Druid is very beneficial against the other aggro decks as it has those removal pieces and Spreading Plague.
Yeah, you could have...
How it does, going into game number 1, it's going to be Impact on the Odd Rogue and Docpwn on the Shutterwalk Shaman. I would say this was a good cue from the start for Docpwn.
This one can be fairly close. Do you know if Doc is playing Earthshocks in his Shaman list?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. I would assume that there is probably one Earthshock in there.
Okay.
I think the most common lists have been playing one Earthshock. It's very strong in last year's standing when you expect to be queuing into matchups like the Even Warlock. So I wouldn't be surprised to see it. And the reason I say this was a fairly decent queue overall for Docpwn was that one thing that Rogue really struggles with in this current meta is once you make one board state, you kind of rely on that board state to snowball. You rely on Hench Clan Thug, you rely on Vicious Fledgling, and Docpwn has Storms and Volcanoes that can clear up that board state, and Impact may just not have the follow-up needed in order to capitalize on that.
Yeah, the AoE from the Shaman is quite nice against the Odd Rogue. The big problems for Docpwn are going to be early Hench Clan Thugs or Edwins that he doesn't have a Hex or an Earthshock for, which is why I ask about the Earthshocks, just because they're additional answers for those early larger minions. And then Myra's Unstable Element can be a final reload to get maybe one or two stronger boards that Doc doesn't have AoE for, because there are 2 Volcanoes and 2 Storms in the deck, but they overload you for the following turns, and eventually Doc will run out of removal. Hagatha, however, does make things that much more favorable for Doc as that one little last push. If you need to rely on it for some outs as far as random spells, you can do that. Not to mention Hagatha, her Battlecry being in the pool with Shutterwalk means that you don't necessarily need to play Shutterwalk with the full combo to win this game. Sometimes you can just play it, win the board, win that way.
Yeah, it's kind of the combination of that healing, that resource value, and, you know, just overall having access to that powerful board clear in Volcano. We see that Docpwn currently does not have that in the hand, but he's going to have some time to pick it up. Can stall with the Serenite Chain Gang here, and I wouldn't be surprised to see that. You know, you don't really want to be taking too much damage. You kind of soften up the Hench Clan Thug as well. It's weaker to, say, a Coin Fungalmancer, but you really can't be playing too hard into that. You kind of have to accept that, you know, you really has no other plays, and this is the one that is, you know, the safest against the majority of the plays that Impact can do.
Yeah, I mean, if Impact has the counter to this, then so be it. Doc really didn't have anything else that he could have done this turn. Another key card in Doc's deck is going to be that Electra Storm Surge, just strictly for its flexibility. Play it alongside Farsight, get 2 discounted cards. Play it with Healing Rain, you're healing for twice as much. Also with Lightning Storm, it can be removal onto, you know, a board such as this, where it's taller minions instead of a wider board state. The issue there being that Electra does overload you twice, depending on which spell you play with her. It is like you played that spell twice.
Yeah, but just playing that spell twice sometimes is all you really need. You go ahead and clear up most board states with that double Lightning Storm effect. Anywhere from that 4 health to even 6 health range, you kind of clean it up. And that was a good spot from Docpwn, just using the Glacial Shard that he picked up off the top in order to save his health as much as possible. If he can not take that much damage and go late into the game where he doesn't have to use Healing Rain to just, you know, barely stay alive, he's in a pretty good spot. But he's going to need to find that AoE.
Yeah, this is going to require removal very quickly. This turn, the strongest thing that Doc can do would be Grumble World Shaker, but I am wondering if at what point does he have to go for that Farsight and try to dig a little bit deeper? With Shutterwalk Shaman, if you don't have early combinations with Acolyte of Pain or Stick a Manatide Totem, you do run into situations where you don't draw through your deck fast enough. And it's not necessarily that he's looking for the combo this game. Again, he just needs to clear the board and doesn't have those tools just yet. So I would see next turn more likely being, you know, full 7 mana Life Drinker Farsight with the Farsight first and then reevaluating after that. But this turn, at least the Grumble challenge is on the board, and he just saw Vile Spine being played. But holy heck, this is a lot of damage. Impact can even get down a Dire Mole and the Edwin after this, and this is going to be a bigger board than a Volcano can clear.
Is a pretty large board. This is a bit risky to say a Hex in a way, but you know, he's not really worried about that because if he hexes, that's Docpwn dedicating his entire turn. He's not in mind control tech range, and he just has a setup lethal with this Leroy. This is looking really strong for Impact right here, and I'm not quite sure what, you know, Docpwn can really get himself into, because even if he healing rains, the Hench Clan Thug's just going to re-deal that damage.
There is going to be...
Yeah, I think it has
12,
to be...
21, 23. It's going to be 29 with Leroy and the dagger. So double healing rain will put Doc at 30, and he would not technically be dead, but there is no coming back.
I think he has to go Farsight into a Hex and then healing rain. That, so it doesn't technically clear the board, but there is a small chance.
There's a chance that it clears Edwin and Hench Clan Thug,
Edwin
but
and Hench
it's
Clan Thug.
nearly non-existent.
I think
Doc
the
just needs
Farsight
to
had to be committed that turn.
I think he needs to go with the Volcano and hope that it's enough. If he plays Healing Rain, he goes to 26. He's already staring down 20 on board with the dagger adding 3 power.
It's a very difficult call. If you make this play, you're kind of accepting the fact that you die to Leroy every time. But, you know, Impact only has 2 cards, really hasn't been playing them. So, unfortunately for Docpwn, he's going to go fall down pretty early.
This is a hard matchup for the Shutterwalk Shaman, especially if you're playing the Keleseth variant and you don't find Keleseth. While Pyromancer tends to be a little bit more forgiving against Odd Rogue because you can, you know, sometimes you might have to utilize a couple resources early on, and that's not ideal, but you can clear a Hench Clan Thug with a Pyromancer, a coin, and, you know, like a Zapper, an Earth Shock, or a Lightning Bolt, depending on what spell suite you are running in the deck. But because all of these Shutterwalk Shamans are favoring Keleseth, that just weakens their strategy if they don't find the Keleseth. I prefer the Pyromancer. I think it's more flexible right now.
It's a difficult call with the Pyromancer. You do have to play a little bit more, you know, those awkward spells to just try and benefit from them. And if you have Prince Keleseth, it is a very powerful spike. But we saw there, I think it was just a combination of Docpwn not having that early game removal that he really needed. He needed to have that Volcano a turn earlier. He needed to have a Hex just for the Hench Clan Thug when it got out of control. And Impact just capitalized on having that Edwin Van Cleef in his deck. I'm not a huge fan of having Edwin Van Cleef in the Odd Rogue. I think it has its positioning. I think it has its spots where it shines, but a lot of times it can just be a 3-mana 2/2 that just kind of sits there in the hand. If you play a 1-drop with it, then sure, maybe it's a 4/4, but the majority of your minions that are 3-drops are pretty powerful. But I can see where it fits in the list. When it does things like this, it's powerful.
Yeah, and it definitely operates really well against Shutterwalk Shaman because it's a cheap minion that lets you get out of range of Volcano when in combination with a couple of other minions like we saw there. So Impact just off to a blistering fast start. Docpwn, when the first thing that you can play is a Sarnate Chain Gang on turn 4. You know, that happens sometimes. It wasn't good enough here. And Doc's going to need to counter this rogue with either his Druid or his own rogue. I think he's going into this one with the Druid.
I definitely think he's going in with the Druid. He's going to lead with the Druid just because that is the best matchup. The Rogue has been notoriously doing very well. Quest Rogue into Odd Rogue has been doing well over the course of the tournament, but it's still an unfavorable for Docpwn if he doesn't hit those very specific cards that he needs. So I think the Druid's going to be let out here. I wouldn't be surprised to see this Druid, you know, just kind of take it by storm, end up winning the game. And it's going to come down to that. This is a pretty strong matchup overall for the Druid. It has the early game removal. It has the defensive tools. It has the ramp. It has the board states. It has everything it needs to win this matchup.
And really importantly, Doc still has 2 decks that are very capable of sweeping an entire lineup. Quest Rogue does actually have better matchups against aggro than we give it credit for most of the time, I think. And Token Druid is just, I would say, the best deck in the tournament. I think it's the deck that has the best matchups across the board. I think it's been sweeping most consistently. I'm shocked that it has not been banned more than it has.
It's just very hard to dedicate a ban, especially when a lot of these players have, you know, a very refined answer to it. We see in Docpwn's list, he is running a copy of Scenarios that's a bit slower in this matchup. It's going to cost him a little bit just because it's going to be an awkward card to play out. But he does have that Wild Growth, does have that Nourish start. That's pretty good. You saw him there evaluating whether he wanted to keep that Ultimate Infestation. I like him tossing it. I think it's a bit too slow to start off with, especially because if you're ramping and then you have that Ultimate Infestation and you can't clear, say, a Vicious Fledgling or a Hench Clan Thug, it becomes very problematic.
Yeah, this is definitely a matchup where the Druid can't just go all in on the ramp strategy and miss removal in the early turns, because then you do get punished by Henge Clan Thug, Vicious Fledgling, and again, a matchup where Edwin Van Cleef is very strong. And I do want to take a second to point out that Crystallizer that Impact has in the deck, it is taking the place of Dire Mole. Do you really see any benefits or drawbacks? Or no, he's actually
taking
playing...
the place of Argent Squire.
Okay, he's playing Dire Mole and Crystallizer. Interesting. You know what? It plays around Blood Knight.
Yeah, it plays around Blood Knight, but it's also, it kind of has its niche little roles where an Argent Squire technically has 2 health, so a Druid could hero power it over 2 or it dies to swipe, whereas Dire Mole and Crystallizer, they have that 3 health, which means they don't die to that swipe, left over 1 damage, or they don't die to that hero power over 2 turns.
Yeah.
That's the main reason to play it. The only time I would say that Crystallizer, you know, has its drawbacks is if Impact were to play Myra's Unstable Element, go to Fatigue, and then the dealing 5 damage would actually kill Impact himself. That's a very niche scenario, and I think that's one of the very few times where potentially not having that extra health matters. But there are those niche scenarios as well where you cold blood the Argent Squire and it trades up into a minion. It's definitely, you know, drawbacks.
Yeah. 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other. There's different reasons why you want these different minions in the deck, but seeing that Blood Knight has been as popular as it has recently and recognizing there's probably going to be a fair amount of Zoo in this tournament, I do like the inclusion of the Crystallizer. Docpwn just having to play Libidinous Floop by itself. He could have coined the Nourish here, but he really wanted to check that Vicious Fledgling, and we can see with the Dagger and the Deadly Poison in hand, Impact is going to get so much value out of this Fledgling.
And so one thing I was thinking about previous turn is I almost wouldn't have minded if Docpwn had gone for a play where he played the Savage Roar and then coined out the hero power just to answer the Vicious Fledgling.
Yep.
He answers the Vicious Fledgling. Impact's most powerful play is 1-drop, 3-drop. And then he goes Nourish. Now that the Vicious Fledgling's been answered, he goes ahead and ramps. He has the draw follow-up. He has the Spreading Plague. Impact's going to be conscious of that, and he won't have this monstrosity on the board of a Wind Fury Vicious Fledgling.
Yeah, it definitely gets countered with, well, not much. SI7 Agent can't be played alongside the Dagger that turn. You're still 1 turn off from Bowspine Slayer even being playable. So this was really the only situation where that Floop gets cleared off without the Fledgling having to, you know, take a trade into it or just adapt around it, essentially.
I think one thing to look at is if Vicious Fledgling can be answered, I think it should be. It's, you know, too strong of a card because of this. I think Impact, does Impact have, the Impact just has lethal.
Yeah, Leroy, that's exactly 11 damage. That Fledgling dealt 12 damage, and Impact is in a massively favorable position now. Holy crap, that ended fast.
Yeah, that's the power of Odd Rogue. Sometimes you just stick a Vicious Fledgling.
Wow.
Sometimes you stick a Henge Clan Thug. You strap a Cold Blood onto it, and it just puts in work. That's with Wild Growth and Nourish and Branching Pads in the opening hand for Docpwn. I do think a little bit of this could have been prevented if Docpwn had gone for the Savage Roar Coin hero power in order to clean up the Vicious Fledgling. Even if Impact had some kind of response, it wouldn't be as strong as the Vicious Fledgling. That's were the second one, or say an Edwin Van Cleef or Henge Clan Thug. And even if he does, I think it's easier to handle 4-4 Edwin and a Henge Clan Thug than it is that Vicious Fledgling a lot of the time, because it constantly buffs itself. So if he clears that off and then he goes for the Nourish on the following turn, I think he has a real legitimate chance to win that game. I think it was that one key turn that Docpwn may have made a mistake.
You can make an argument that Druid decks should put in Wrath specifically back into the decks, because there's your removal for Zoo and Odd Rogue, but Druid has such strong recovery mechanics right now that it's
also kind of
pointless.
It's also the fact that it's very hard to fit in all these cards that you want to play for certain matchups when you're forced to play a 25-card shell.
It's irrelevant most of the time to have that additional single piece of removal because Spellstone is normally so good. But Docpwn's going to be down to just his Quest Rogue. Going to have to reverse sweep 3 aggressive decks with Quest Rogue. And aggro should be Quest Rogue's biggest weakness. However, with the Mage out of the picture, and the Mage being the strongest counter to Quest Rogue, this is still technically winnable for Doc. It's just going to be really difficult.
There's a chance, and with Glacial Shard and a Sonya, it may be more feasible than it first seems. It's definitely a rough matchup, but the one thing is Quest Rogue has gained a lot of tools that allow it to be better in this matchup. It used to be just the fact that the odd rogue would just have a ball, just keep going face and just putting pressure on, but with the inclusion of a card like Giggling Inventor, it makes it much harder for odd rogue to continuously push that damage, especially when you need to dedicate so much of your turn just to clearing off the Annoyatrons. And with Sonya, all it takes is something like a deckhand and the board can be cleared in the future turns.
Very similar to the last 2 games. If Doc finds himself in a position where he's cleared the board, he's stabilized his own board, and his life total is secure, he's going to win the game. But we saw Impact kill Doc on turn 5 last game, and on something like turn 7 the game before. He's had what he's needed to rush these games. We're just going to need to see if he has it again. And with the Fungalmancer to be played on turn 5, he has pretty much the power curve.
And Impact just keeps drawing play after play and has so much pressure on this board. Docpwn does have the advantage, but that advantage is a turn away right now. Docpwn's got to find a way to live before he can even play that card.
If he doesn't find the preparation, that's not coming down. Giggling Inventor off the top would soak up 4 hits. But Blood Knight's in the hand for Impact as well, so that's a liability. Jeez.
I mean, this game's also almost done on turn 5. Impact has won both of his series earlier on turns 5 and 6. This one's looking to be the same story.
I mean, Doc's lineup is pretty weak to Odd Rogue when it draws its ideal curve. We've just seen Odd Rogue be more inconsistent than this throughout the rest of the tournament. But to be fair, we didn't see a lot of Impact's matches. We don't know how well this Odd Rogue has been performing for him.
I mean, we have a couple players in the top 8 that brought the Odd Rogue. I believe another player was Gallon, who has Odd Rogue a part of his lineup. I mean, maybe it's something, there's more to it than what first seems. Maybe Quest Rogue, isn't all the rage. I do think Quest Rogue's a very powerful deck. And to be honest, there is still a chance for Docpwn. He can go ahead and vanish out next turn. He's still at a okay life total, not the greatest. He's got the Sonya Boar.
Yeah.
And then if he can just live and clear up some of the board and just get to that quest and then do stuff with Vicious Scalehide, there's still a chance.
It's like a checklist with 5 things on it, though.
But he's got double vanish. He can go vanish next turn, kind of neutralize the board state a little bit. Impact's going to be forced to be playing not as much as he can. Then he could go boar vanish. Then he could go hopefully draw into a preparation later on and end the game that way.
I mean, if he's going to win the game, it's going to be with Sonya and the boars.
And
Impact doesn't have any. He doesn't have any charging damage right now, so it's not impossible. He's going to reload on board as much as he can. But Impact from the position of cards in Doc's hand can get a read that there is another vanish.
Yes, if Impact is keeping track right now, he will know. But of course, he's going to go ahead and force this board to be committed anyways. There's no reason not to. Docpwn does have the potential to go Stone Tusk, Boar, Vanish.
I do want to say, I kind of wish that Impact had played the Fungalmancer on his turn going into Doc's turn 6. Just knowing that that is when Vanish is playable for Doc, he could have squeezed in a little bit of extra damage there instead of going wider. If this matchup comes down to Doc stabilizing on just a couple points of life, maybe that could have been the difference maker.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that could have been done slightly different from both these players' sides. Wouldn't be surprised to see this come down, and the deckhand, it was a great draw. It's going to allow him to clean up this Hench Clan Thug while also putting damage into another minion. Could have done it with the boar, but I think the deckhand, it makes much more sense to kind of complete it with this one.
Just one less minion that you have to play.
Yeah, it's one less minion you have to play, and it's also the fact that when you complete it with deckhand, sometimes you don't necessarily have that dagger up. You want to utilize deckhand when it's more valuable rather than committing to Stone Tusk Boar and not having a dagger grab later on, and then just losing because of that.
Deckhand can be hard to use after you've played Valyra the Hollow, specifically.
Yes.
If Doc gets to that point, he'll be ecstatic.
And this is the 5th deckhand in the hand. And
So
it
that
may
will be quest
case,
completion.
That will be quest completion, and he does have the Vicious Scalehide.
I mean, this one was looking like Impact was very far ahead. It looked like he was going to be able to end the game by probably this turn at the latest. But Doc does have a way to stabilize, and it's entirely on the back of Sonya Shadow Dancer. Sonya and Giggling Inventor are primarily the reasons why Quest Rogue is so powerful right now. If Sonya were not in this deck, I do not think we'd be seeing Quest Rogue.
I think that's a very fair assessment. Impact's going to be careful. Has to dedicate 2 damage to this Sonya. And knowing there's another Vanish, he's playing these cards in a way that he gets the SI7 agent back, I believe.
Yep, it is in the order that your minions was played that they are bounced back to your hand.
If you're a Docpwn in this spot, you do have that opportunity to complete and play out the Vicious Scalehide, but I would not be surprised to see him just go ahead and Vanish. I think you might need to. Could play the Novice first and then Vanish in order to draw an extra card in the future turns, or could just Vanish, then play Novice, force Impact to put the 2 damage into the Novice Engineer.
Just to prevent it from
becoming a 4/4. And I don't know how I like this play right here.
I mean, Doc will have to concede that he's dead to Leroy Coldblood or Leroy Deadly Poison.
I mean, he does
even
know
Leroy's
half the
second
hand.
SI7 agent.
Docpwn does know 3 of the cards in the hand, that there's a Vicious Fledgling, a Hench Clan Thug, and that Flame Elemental.
Is this better than just vanishing the whole board? There's 4 power on the board now, so Doc is he's still dead to Leroy Coldblood. Which would have been the same situation.
It does increase some outs, per se, in the Fungalmancer. So a Fungalmancer Coldblood, it would do something like that. But, you know, it means that Impact has to answer this Scalehide. If he doesn't answer this Scalehide and then he bounces it back and keeps going with it, that's just as bad. So the Fungalmancer damage might have to commit it into the Scalehide.
I don't think you can leave the Scalehide up, but then Doc goes to 18. And Impact has not drawn his burst damage this game. He hasn't found Coldbloods, hasn't found that Leroy. If he did, he probably would have won earlier.
I think Doc may have turned this game around, and it was looking so grim at the start. It was looking like Impact was just going to 3-0 this series, and we were going to be on to the next game.
It's looking like he might be turning the corner right now. Again, I have to wonder, there were 2 turns where Fungalmancer could have been played to push a little bit of extra damage. Could that have changed things? Hard to say. There's still just not enough burst for Impact to close out the game, regardless. So it does look like he's going to have to commit to killing this Vicious Scalehide here and then just... Oh, no, he's not. He's going to hope that Doc doesn't have it. All right. You know, maybe that's just his best chance of winning. If he kills the Fledgling, Doc goes to 18, and Impact is maybe conceding in his mind at that point. He doesn't want to do that.
So Docpwn can go value trade, Shadow Step, take another value trade, then Vanish, then play either Mimic Pod or Novice Engineer plus the Boar. Could also go for Boar, kill off the Hench Clan Thug, value trade, value trade. It could also just, I mean, is there potential lethal here as well? I haven't been looking at that either.
4, 8, 12, 16, 17. There would need to be 1 more bouncer for the Boar. If Impact had killed the Fledgling, Docpwn would have 3 more, would have 7 more life, actually, excuse me. But he would not have a Fledgling in hand. That's going to be game no matter what. With the Vanish
I'm not sure.
and the Shadow Step, he might have actually had lethal there with the Vanish. I didn't count the exact mana cost.
I think he was...
He played 2 boars, then he vanished, then he played another boar, then he shadow stepped, then he played another boar. Yeah, that should have been exactly the 4 additional damage that he was missing there. So Doc did actually find the lethal there with the vanish. Very nicely played by Docpwn in that one. Again, I have to wonder, could Impact maybe have gone a little bit more aggressive? He didn't get the tools that he really needed in that game. He didn't get the burst damage finishers that he found in the 2 previous games, and Doc was able to hold down just long enough. That Mimic Pod into Vanish looked really weak initially. It ended up being game-winning for him.
It was. I mean, Vanish is just such a powerful card. I think a lot of Quest Rogue players say Vanish is a keep in almost every single matchup. It is that powerful of a card against aggressive decks. It gives you that breathing room in order to complete your quest and to kind of stall out the game just that moment longer. That way you can win it. Against control decks, the only way you lose a lot of the times is by getting out pressured, and it allows you to not only complete your quest, but it also allows you to stop the pressure from happening.
All right, Impact going to try to counter the Rogue with Zoo Warlock. This is a good matchup for the Zoolock. But again, the longer it goes, the more it favors the Rogue. Finish the quest, stabilize, Rogue wins from there. So Impact just needs to do what he came here to do, and that's go fast.
Impact's got to be as aggressive as possible. Like we were saying, you know, this Rogue is very strong. And if you leave it go unchecked, even with a full aggro lineup, it can sweep you. It's going to be difficult for Docpwn, though, especially with such a hand like this. This is not what you want to see right now. Ooh, an Impact draws one of the best cards off the top. He doesn't have gas after this, but this is a powerful opener.
Doesn't really matter when you don't have a lot of follow-up, when
You're not
there's
wrong.
No way the Doc can clear this board.
I think the most is prep Fan of Knives into coin Fan of Knives, and that still leaves up a 1-1 and a 3-1.
Yeah, I think you got a coin fan this turn. Coin fan into fan, and then... then what are we doing? He doesn't have any cheap minions to play. He doesn't have any idea of what he wants to complete the quest with.
I wouldn't be surprised to see Hero Power here. Just kind of wait it out a little bit. Maybe do the Fan of Knives. You will be taking a lot of damage, but you have to hope that Impact whiffs turn after turn, and you can eventually go coin Giggling Inventor and hopefully find something with that there. I don't think coining out the Fan of Knives is potentially a winning line of play.
If you don't do it, though, you're going to be taking another... Another 3 damage.
You only take 2 less damage if you were to coin the Fan of Knives out now. And I think you have to squeeze every little bit of health you can. That is a whiff for this turn.
And he does get to dagger up and make sure that the Voidwalker gets cleared up with the double fan.
And if he draws prep, he can clear the entire board. I think he's really going to be hoping for that.
Wow.
Oh, that's a preparation.
Okay.
If he chooses to do so, he can clear this entire board, force Impact on the back foot. Impact's going to be playing 1 minion, can then coin out the Giggling Inventor. With that draw, Docpwn might just be in a favorable position now. It's still going to be rough, but it's looking pretty good for him right now.
Let's go, Doc. Okay.
He's not.
Now we've got
he's a fellow doctor for a reason.
That was the opener from Impact. The opener without Keliseth, mind you, but still hitting a cheap heal, a cheap damaging minion, and a happy ghoul should be almost impossible for the Quest Rogue to deal with.
Here comes the Giggling Inventor. I almost wouldn't be surprised to see the Shadow Step be committed to the Giggling Inventor, because you really need to have that defensive stall. If you don't have that defensive stall, it gets a bit dicey.
The doubling imp into the Fungal Mancer is still a really nice sequence of turns here for Impact. And he is playing Leroy in his Zoo, so Leroy Soulfire is going to be a guaranteed 10 damage, whereas Doomguard can make things a little bit more iffy.
And the reason you have the Shadow Step here is for a card like Despicable Dreadlord. I wouldn't be surprised if Impact is running that in his Warlock list. It's been cut down to 1 a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But it's still in the list for the most part. And there's 2 copies of it within Impacts. But it's in the list for the most part because it does give you some game against a lot of the decks like Token Druid and Odd Paladin if they do, you know, come into the play. And against this matchup, it allows you to clean up the Giggling Inventor without having to get through all the Annoytrons.
In the light's name.
That was a pretty strong Solarium. Didn't go for the Fungal Mancer with the Guaranteed. That could have backfired a lot if, you know, say a 5-drop and a 3-drop were drawn that weren't that impactful. Oh.
Wow.
Docpwn also finds that Vanish.
Doc has stabilized so well this game. Giggling Inventor can come down this turn. It's very unlikely that Impact can get through to kill the Giggling Inventor. Doc can vanish away all of the minions, put that Giggling Inventor back in his hand.
Could also use the Vicious Scale Hide to kill off the Light Warden. That's going to be a difficult call from Docpwn whether he wants to do that or not, because you are dedicating your turn to Vanish, and if you do that, you bounce the Light Warden back. But also giving Impact a 1-mana minion just to play back onto the board, especially being as powerful as Light Warden, it's not really something you want to do. But then again, you might need this Vicious Scale Hide later on in order to regain the life that you've lost.
I think it's fine to hold on to it here.
I think so as well. It's definitely a tough
You get to dagger
call.
up as well, which is, that's nice to carry that over in case you find the deckhand. Looking at Impact's Zoo list, because he has 2 copies of Despicable Dreadlord, it leaves him less room for tech cards like Blood Knight. He doesn't actually have any of them in his deck.
That was a pretty decent life tap for Impact. Does find a potential play. If he life tapped, he would have just maybe had to dedicate his turn to Happy Ghoul. Especially finding that Serenite Chain Gang. I mean, if you're Docpwn, you have to vanish.
He's got no
I'm
choice.
not seeing anything else.
Vanish and then
hope
What
Impact has
happens?
a very weak turn. But playing this
looking
Giggling
like it's
Inventor
gonna be pretty
over and
reasonable,
over,
though.
and then eventually living to Valera, and then playing 2 Giggling Inventors, there's potential for Doc to get this quest done on Giggling Inventor, which is very slow.
It's incredibly counterintuitive, but it happens. We see the quest completed on Youthful Brewmaster. I've seen it done on Elven Minstrel. You know, you work with what you have available to you, and in a matchup against Zoo, bouncing Giggling Inventor time after time is
In the light's
really,
name.
really good. I mean, yeah, maybe Glacial Shard's better, but this is the way that the deck has panned out for Doc this game, and if he hadn't found that prep off the top to double fan on turn 3, he would not have even made it this far.
There's a Glacial Shard picked up. That will help out a little bit as well. Can stall out for a little bit longer. I mean, Docpwn has to play the Giggling Inventor. I think there's no way around that. He really wants to get these Minstrels out of the hand just to try and draw some bouncers for this Giggling Inventor, but he can't afford to right now.
Yeah, he's not going to have the mana for the Minstrels until I would say he's already won this game.
Yeah, I think it's just going to be Giggling Inventor plus Annoyatron.
His mana is going to be taken up pretty much every turn slotted out to just try and save himself. When he gets to Valera the Hollow, he has a turn of Stealth where maybe he can reevaluate after that. You get Death's Shadow as well for an additional copy of a card that you've played. And that's where he would really like to have another Giggling Inventor, but no choice. Need to play it this turn.
And there's still also that draw of Sonya Shadow Dancer. He doesn't necessarily have to commit to completing the quest on Giggling Inventor. Right now, it's looking to be that way. But eventually could, you know, get the quest done with some kind of Sonya later on. But he's going to go ahead and commit the Stone Tusk Boar, clean up as much as possible. And I do like this because it does protect one of the Annoytrons in the Glacial Shard as well.
Those are the 2 priority minions to have multiple copies of.
I think Impact's really trying to dig for that Despicable Dreadlord right now. You've seen him life tap quite a bit throughout the course of the game. I think that's mostly because he wants to find Despicable Dreadlord in order to be able to answer this Giggling Inventor behind the wall of Annoyatrons.
But look at all the pressure that Impact's going to just keep having every single turn. I mean, until Doc completes the quest, he is never going to be able to stabilize, and I'm not confident that he has the tools to survive to complete that quest. Even with the prep fan on turn 3 giving him this much time, I mean, he's had these double minstrels in hand the entire game. It's just been a little bit too clogged. If he had Glacial Shard and Shadow Step and bounce effects, maybe this would be a different story.
Does find that Youthful Brewmaster, though. Can commit to the Youthful Brewmaster onto the Giggling Inventor. I think what Docpwn's evaluating here is how can he live while keeping the Giggling Inventor in hand, playing Valera, and then playing double Giggling Inventor on the following turn. I think that's what Docpwn is thinking about right now. He has to commit his mana to bounce this Giggling Inventor back to his hand no matter what he does. I think he realizes that.
But he needs to keep it there.
But the question is, could he get away with doing some crazy play where he doesn't play the Giggling Inventor? I think the answer is no.
I don't think it's possible. His only other options are, he's dedicating 2 mana, so he's got 6 left. You can play the Elven Minstrel after that and find another Glacial Shard. And is he playing Wax Elemental?
I don't believe he's playing Wax Elemental.
There's not the defensive potential in the deck for him to survive unless he plays this Giggling Inventor here. And that means he's going to have to find a...
He's going to have to rely on drawing the second Giggling Inventor naturally.
Yeah. I mean, he still has cards in the deck that can help him get there. Vanish would be really nice. If he's not dead this turn, Valera the Hollow gives him another turn, but is he dead this turn? We've got to put in 5 attacks to the Annoyotrons.
That takes up the entire board space, and even with Leroy connecting to the face, would have needed a Soulfire there. Impact has not found it yet. Impact's been struggling to find it. Docpwn's going to be safe for 1 turn. Won't have his dagger up for South Sea Deckhand.
Quest not completed. Another Giggling Inventor is not available. He can find the natural Giggling Inventor or a Shadow Step to be able to bounce that Giggling this turn when he plays Valera. Or just the natural Giggling Inventor, obviously, to have post Valera.
Actually, I'm trying to see, is there a way Impact could have played both
Leroy
and I don't think there was enough healing. He did have the Voodoo Doctor, but the Voodoo Doctor only puts
Light Warden to 7.
Puts Light Warden to 7, which would not have been enough. Did not have enough in order to
attack with the Leroy, bump the Light Warden up to 9. And
exactly. There was not enough there, so Impact was so close. It's going to come down to what can Docpwn find here.
Yeah, Impact was 1 source of damage or 1 source of healing away from the Light Warden being able to kill Doc.
And the very hard question Impact has to ask himself now is if he plays Valera with the intent of hoping to draw a Giggling Inventor, does he still win the game, or does he need to go for some crazy Novice Engineer play where he draws Vanish and hopes to win that way? I think you have to go for Valera, because I think you can do that next turn. I think it's got to be Valera, but Docpwn's asking himself, what do I need after Valera?
What is his best sequence of draws that he could get? If he has to absolutely take the biggest risk for every turn this game, does he need to start doing it now? He's going to wait 1 more turn. We can see that Impact with the Leroy Jenkins and the Fungal Mancer would only have 8 damage. Doc would be on 9 if he found the Vanish. But Leroy plus that Life Drinker would be the 9. So even without a Soulfire in hand, depending on the way that these minions would be vanished back to hand, Impact may have had lethal.
This is intense.
This is going to be very close.
Docpwn's going to have 2 draws for Vanish. And I think with Vanish, overall, he's fairly safe. I think the most potential burst damage that Impact could have if Vanish comes out, the second one, would be 14. But that would rely on 2 Soulfires, which we've seen. I think Docpwn knows there's no Soulfire yet because of the way the game's been played. There still could be one. Does have prep. It's got to be a Hail Mary play at this point, looking for that Vanish.
Novice once.
Novice twice.
You don't find it, Novice twice.
Maybe even draw another Novice. I don't know at this point.
You like my invention?
Gonna need to be the Vanish.
Sonya a little bit too late.
Sonya's a little too late. Needs to be the Vanish off the second Novice Engineer. Still has one more draw towards it. Can't commit anything else.
I hope you like my invention.
Will he find it?
Is. Can't bounce it back and do it again. I think
Nope.
that's game.
Even with prep, it's not going to be enough mana for the Vanish.
Choose soon.
Doc, so close, but Impact just favorable matchups for this Rogue deck, and even after getting one win online, could not get the Zoo off of the board. Impact's all aggro lineup is looking very good, Jay.
Yeah, it looked very strong that game. I mean, that just goes to show you, you bring the all aggro lineup, you push the damage face over and over, especially when you hit matchups like that. I think a lot of players